The breakdown. The skies over Terran District 9 were heavy with pollution that afternoon. The smog hung thick between the towering habitat stacks, creating an oppressive heat that made even the recycled air feel like breathing through wet cloth. It was in this forgotten corner of New São Paulo, where the lower atmosphere scrubbers had been offline for months, that Hrix found himself stranded. His sleek obsidian cruiser, a Draco Stellar X300 worth more credits than most humans in this district would see in 5 lifetimes, sat immobilized on a cracked landing pad at the edge of Sector 7. The ship's diagnostics panel glowed angry red as warning indicators flashed across the console. The propulsion core had overheated and shut down mid-flight, forcing an emergency landing in the last place a dragon of his status wanted to be. Hrix paced around his vessel, his scaled tail swishing in irritation, talons clicking against the concrete. His normally immaculate business attire, a custom exosuit designed to accommodate his draconic form while presenting the sleek appearance expected of a corporate executive, was now stained with lubricant fluid. His comlink had no signal this deep in the district, and the ship's emergency beacon seemed to be malfunctioning. "Worthless piece of imported junk," he muttered, striking the hull with a wrench he barely knew how to use. The metallic clang echoed through the empty landing zone, where the only signs of life were a pair of scavenger drones fighting over a discarded power cell and a mangy synthetic pet lounging in the shadows. That's when he heard it, a soft shuffling sound coming from behind a stack of abandoned cargo containers. Hrix's sensitive hearing picked up the careful footsteps immediately. His amber eyes narrowed, pupils contracting to slits as he scanned the area. "I know you're there," he called out, his voice carrying the natural resonance that all dragons possessed. "Show yourself." A small figure emerged from behind the containers. A human girl, no more than 12 Earth Standard years, regarded him with cautious intelligence. She wore mismatched environment gear, oversized overalls with numerous repair patches, a faded shirt that had once been white, and boots that had clearly been salvaged from a disposal unit. Her hair was tied back in a practical knot, and her face, though smudged with grime, revealed alert eyes that studied him with surprising intensity. "Ship broke down?" she asked, her voice carrying the distinctive accent of the lower districts. Hrix raised a scaled eyebrow ridge but didn't respond immediately. He assessed the girl with the same calculating gaze he used in corporate negotiations. "Your thermal regulator is leaking," she continued, pointing toward the underside of his vessel. "You've been running the atmospheric compensators too hard. And you're an expert on draconian ship systems now?" Hrix responded dryly. The girl's mouth twitched in what might have been a smile. She reached into a worn backpack and pulled out a small, rusted multi-tool that looked ancient compared to the sophisticated equipment in Hrix's ship. "My friend Tech taught me stuff," she said with a shrug. "I fix things. Want me to try?" Hrix laughed, but there was no mockery in it, just genuine surprise. "A human child from the lower district is going to repair a 500,000 credit Draco Stellar?" She didn't react to his tone, just stood there waiting. "Do you want to get out of here or not?" Hrix looked around at the desolate landing pad. No repair crews would venture this deep into District 9 without charging extortionate fees, and even then, they'd take hours to arrive. His business meeting with the Centurion delegation was in 3 hours. "Go ahead," he said finally, gesturing toward the ship. "Try your luck." Unexpected revelations. The girl approached without hesitation, climbed onto a maintenance ledge, and slipped into the access port with practiced ease. Hrix watched, fascinated despite himself, as her small frame disappeared into the compartment housing the thermal regulation system. Inside the ship, the girl moved with surprising confidence. She navigated the complex machinery, located the malfunctioning component, and began working. Minutes later, her voice echoed from within the compartment. "Hand me that plasma sealant by your foot." Hrix picked up a canister he hadn't even noticed and passed it to the small hand that emerged from the access port. More sounds of tinkering followed. The girl worked for nearly 20 minutes, emerging occasionally to ask for tools or to rummage through her own backpack for unusual items that she had salvaged. Finally, she emerged, wiping her hands on her overalls. Try the ignition sequence now. That's it? Hrix asked skeptically. She nodded, eyes fixed on the ship. Hrix accessed the control panel through his wrist interface, remotely initiating the startup protocol. The engines hummed, coughed once, then roared to life, steadier and with a cleaner resonance than they'd had in months. Hrix turned to the girl, genuine surprise evident in his expression. What exactly did you do? Bypassed the regulator loop, sealed the microfracture in the cooling system, and recalibrated the thermal sensors, she replied matter-of-factly. Your ship's AI was compensating wrong. It happens with the X-300S when they fly through ionic storms. Before Hrix could respond, the girl was already turning to leave, shouldering her small backpack. Wait, Hrix called. What's your name? She paused, looking back at him with that calculating gaze again. Lyra. Lyra, he repeated. I'm Hrix. She nodded once, as if to say the introduction was unnecessary. Dragons were rare enough that most knew of the wealthy few who controlled interplanetary shipping lanes. How did you learn to fix draconian technology? He asked. Lots of abandoned ships around here. Rich folks dump them when repairs cost more than buying new ones. There was no accusation in her tone, just statement of fact. We figure them out. Have to survive somehow. As she spoke, she pushed up the sleeve of her jacket slightly, and a glint of metal caught Hrix's eye. On her finger was a ring, small, silver, with a distinctive blue stone that seemed to pulse with its own inner light. Hrix froze. The ring was unmistakable, a unique piece crafted by the artisans of Draconis Prime, with molecular bonded azurite that changed hue based on the wearer's biological readings. He had commissioned only one such ring in his 237 years of life, as a gift for Danielle, his human partner, before she disappeared from his life 5 years ago. A cold sensation crept up his spine, something dragons rarely experienced. That ring, he said, his voice suddenly tight. Where did you get it? Lyra glanced down at her hand as if she'd forgotten she was wearing it. It was my mother's. She died. Your mother, Hrix repeated slowly. What was her name? Danielle, Lyra answered without hesitation, then turned and walked away, disappearing into the maze of abandoned cargo containers before Hrix could process what he'd just heard. Difficult truths. Hrix stood there, talons gripping the edge of his ship's boarding ramp, his mind racing faster than a quantum processor. Danielle had been his partner, the only human he'd ever truly connected with. They'd been together for 3 years before their relationship imploded under the weight of their differences. He wanted to build his corporate empire, she wanted a simpler life. Their arguments grew more frequent until one day she was simply gone, leaving only a note, can't chase the stars with someone who never wants to land. He'd searched for her, of course, but Danielle had disappeared completely. 2 years later, he received word she had died in an accident on one of the outer colonies. He hadn't even been able to attend her memorial service. And now, a 12-year-old girl was walking away from him wearing the ring he'd given to the woman he'd loved and lost. The mathematics were impossible to ignore. If Lyra was 12 now, and Danielle had left 5 years ago. Lyra, he called out, his voice echoing across the empty landing pad. She stopped but didn't turn around. Please, he said, his corporate composure cracking. I need to talk to you. Slowly, she turned back, her face guarded. About what? About your mother. About Danielle. He took a careful step forward, hands raised in a gesture of peace. I knew her. Lyra's eyes narrowed. You're lying. I'm not. Hrix reached into his jacket and pulled out a small holoprojector. With a gesture, it activated, displaying a three-dimensional image of a woman with kind eyes and auburn hair, laughing at something off-camera. This is Danielle Rodriguez, from the Titan mining colonies. She had a scar on her left hand from a plasma torch accident, and she always hummed old Earth songs when she worked. Lyra's carefully maintained composure cracked. Her eyes widened as she stared at the hologram. That's her. But how do you? Because I loved her, Hrix said simply. And if you're her daughter, then. He swallowed hard, a sound that resonated strangely in his draconic throat. Then I think you might be my daughter too. The words hung in the air between them like a charged particle field. Lyra took a step back, shaking her head. No. That's impossible. Mom never mentioned any dragon. She said my father was a corporate executive who died in a transport accident. She wasn't lying, Hrix said quietly. She just simplified the truth. Dragons live a long time, Lyra. Corporate executives don't always. He deactivated the hologram and sat down on a nearby crate, trying to make himself less imposing. What else did she tell you about your father? Lyra hesitated, then sat on a pile of salvaged materials several meters away. She said he was brilliant but stubborn. That he cared more about his work than about people. That he lived in the sky and forgot there was ground beneath his feet. Each word was like a plasma bolt to Hrix's chest. He'd heard similar accusations from Danielle during their final arguments. She wasn't wrong, he admitted. I was so focused on building my shipping empire that I forgot what I was building it for. When she tried to tell me she wanted to settle down, start a family, I told her she was being impractical. So she left, Lyra said. It wasn't a question. So she left, Hrix confirmed. And apparently, she was already carrying you when she did. They sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of 13 years of separation settling between them like cosmic dust. Finally, Lyra spoke. Why should I believe you? You're just some rich dragon who happened to know my mom. Hrix considered this. She was right to be skeptical. Trust was earned, not given freely, especially in a place like District 9. Because, he said finally, you have my eyes. And my talent for fixing things that others think are broken beyond repair. Building bridges. Over the following days, Hrix found himself returning to District 9. He told himself it was to monitor some shipping routes that passed through the sector, but the truth was simpler and more complex. He needed to know more about the daughter he'd never known existed. Lyra was initially wary of his visits, but gradually, she began to open up. She showed him around her small world, the hidden workshops where she and other children learned to repair salvage technology, the underground markets where they traded their skills for food and shelter, the makeshift families they'd created in the absence of biological ones. This is tech, she said one afternoon, introducing him to an elderly human man with cybernetic implants covering half his face. He taught me everything about electronics. Tech studied Hrix with one biological eye and one mechanical sensor. So you're the famous father, he said with a slight smile. Danielle mentioned you a few times. Called you the dragon who forgot he had a heart. Hrix winced. She had a way with words. She also said you were the smartest being she'd ever met, and that you'd move mountains if you ever found something worth moving them for. Tech's expression grew serious. Question is, have you found that something? Hrix looked at Lyra, who was pretending not to listen while she tinkered with a broken navigation unit. I think I might have. That evening, as they sat on the roof of an abandoned hab block watching the city lights twinkle through the smog, Lyra finally asked the question Hrix had been dreading. Why didn't you come looking for us? For her. Hrix was quiet for a long time. I did look, he said finally. But not hard enough. Not in the right places. I searched the corporate districts, the luxury colonies, the places where I thought someone I cared about would go. It never occurred to me that Danielle would come here, to the lower districts. She came here because it was real, Lyra said. No corporate politics, no artificial status systems. Just people trying to survive and take care of each other. And because she knew I'd never think to look here, Hrix added quietly. Maybe. Lyra picked at the frayed edge of her jacket. She used to say that some people are so busy looking up at the stars that they forget to see what's right in front of them. She was right. Hrix turned to face his daughter fully. I spent 5 years building a shipping empire, thinking that success would somehow bring her back or prove I was worthy of her. But what I should have been doing was learning to see the world the way she did. And how's that? With compassion. With patience. Looking for the potential in broken things instead of just discarding them. He gestured toward the city below them. Like this place. Like the people here. Like us. Lyra was quiet for a moment. Mom kept a picture of you, she said suddenly. In her personal effects. I found it after she died. I used to wonder what my father looked like when he smiled. Hrix felt something crack open in his chest, not pain, but something deeper and more frightening. Hope. Would you like to find out? For the first time since they'd met, Lyra smiled back at him, not the careful, guarded expression she usually wore, but something genuine and warm. And in that moment, Hrix saw not just Danielle's features reflected in his daughter's face, but something of himself as well. Not the corporate executive or the successful dragon, but the being he might have been if he'd learned to value the right things. A new beginning. 6 months later, the skyline of District 9 looked different. The atmosphere scrubbers hummed with renewed efficiency, their repair funded by an anonymous donation from Hrix's corporate accounts. The landing pads had been upgraded and expanded, creating legitimate work for the local mechanics and salvage experts who had always possessed the skills but never the resources. Lyra stood beside her father on the observation deck of his newly established District 9 Operations Center, not a corporate tower designed to loom over the community, but a practical facility built to serve it. Through the reinforced windows, they watched as young people from the district worked alongside off-world technicians, their improvised repair techniques being documented and refined into formal training programs. The Centurion delegation was impressed, Hrix said, reviewing reports on his tablet. They want to establish similar programs on their colony worlds. Turns out that teaching practical engineering through salvage and repair is more effective than traditional classroom methods. Tech always said necessity was the best teacher, Lyra replied, not looking up from the navigation system she was modifying. Over the past months, she'd grown taller and more confident, but she still preferred working with her hands to sitting in meetings. Are you going to accept their proposal? That depends. Would you be interested in consulting on the curriculum design? They specifically requested the young engineer who revolutionized their approach to adaptive problem solving. Lyra finally looked up, her amber eyes, so much like his own, sparkling with interest. They want me to help design education programs. They want you to help them understand how to see potential where others see only problems, Hrix corrected. It's a skill that apparently runs in the family. She grinned, an expression that still made his heart skip in a way no corporate victory ever had. Only if you promise we're not moving to some sterile corporate colony. I like it here. So do I, Hrix admitted. It had taken him months to understand why Danielle had chosen this place, but now he could see what she'd seen, a community that judged people by their actions rather than their species or status, where resourcefulness mattered more than resources, and where a broken ship could become the beginning of something unprecedented. That evening, they walked together through the district's main thoroughfare. The streets were cleaner now, the air filters working properly, but the essential character of the place remained unchanged. Street vendors sold everything from synthetic protein bars to handcrafted electronics. Children played between the hab blocks while their parents worked or socialized in the communal spaces. I've been thinking, Lyra said as they paused at a small memorial garden that had been planted in one of the old cargo yards. About Mom. Hrix tensed slightly. They'd talked about Danielle many times over the months, but it was still a delicate subject. I used to be angry that she never told me about you, Lyra continued. But I think I understand now. She wasn't trying to keep us apart. She was protecting both of us until we were ready. Ready for what? To choose each other, Lyra said simply. Instead of just being stuck with each other because of genetics. Hrix considered this. And have we chosen each other? Lyra reached out and took his scaled hand in her small human one, a gesture that had taken months to feel natural but now seemed as ordinary as breathing. "I think we did that the first day, when you let me fix your ship. Everything else has just been figuring out how to make it work." They stood there in the memorial garden as the district's artificial evening cycle began, the light strips embedded in the building facades creating a gentle glow that pushed back the shadows. Around them, the sounds of the community settling into its nightly rhythms created a symphony of belonging that Hrix had never noticed during his years of flying between distant stars. "Your mother would be proud," he said finally. "Of both of us," Lyra agreed. Above them, a transport ship passed through the upper atmosphere, its running lights blinking as it navigated toward the commercial sectors. But for the first time in his adult life, Hrix felt no urge to follow it. He had found something worth more than all the successful contracts and corporate victories he'd accumulated over the years: a family, a community, and a purpose that extended beyond his own ambitions. As they walked back toward their shared living space, a modest apartment Hrix had established near the operations center, Lyra pulled out her old multi-tool and handed it to him. "Here," she said. "I've been teaching you how to fix things properly. Time for your final exam." Hrix accepted the worn tool with the same reverence he'd once reserved for signing major contracts. "What needs fixing?" Lyra smiled, gesturing toward the thriving community around them, toward the relationship they'd built from the fragments of a broken family, toward the future they were creating together. "Nothing," she said. "For the first time in a long time, I think everything's working exactly the way it should." And as father and daughter walked home together through the heart of District 9, under stars that seemed closer and more welcoming than they ever had before, Hrix realized that sometimes the most important things in life couldn't be fixed, they could only be found. The end.